Take the pretty one, her father said with a forced laugh, gesturing toward the elder daughter as if he were offering a prize horse instead of a human soul. The Duke of Ravenshade stood silently in the center of the dimly lit hall, his dark coat still dusted with snow from the long ride. His presence alone made the air heavy. He was known across the kingdom for his wealth, power, and cold judgment. Many whispered that he had never loved and never would. Before him stood two sisters. Ilara, the elder, was everything society admired. Golden curls framed her flawless face, her silk gown embroidered with care. She stood tall, chin lifted, eyes gleaming with ambition. She had practiced this moment in front of mirrors for years. Beside her stood Mira. Mira wore a plain dress, slightly faded at the hem. Her dark hair was neatly braided, but no jewels adorned her. She kept her gaze lowered, hands clasped tightly as if trying to make herself smaller. Since childhood, she had lived in Ilara's shadow, called the quiet one, the plain one, and worst of all, the burden. Their father cleared his throat again. The elder is beautiful, well-mannered, and ready to serve as your duchess, he said quickly. The other, well, she is obedient. Mira flinched at the word. The Duke's sharp eyes moved from Ilara to Mira. He noticed what others never did, the way Mira's fingers trembled, the faint bruise on her wrist hidden beneath her sleeve, the exhaustion in her eyes that had nothing to do with sleep. Ilara smiled sweetly. It would be my honor, Your Grace. Silence stretched. Then the Duke spoke, his voice calm but unyielding. I did not ask which one was prettiest. The father blinked, confused. I asked for a wife, the Duke continued, turning fully toward Mira now. And I see one who has learned patience, endurance, and humility. Mira's head snapped up, shock flooding her face. I choose her, he said. The room erupted. What? Ilara gasped, her smile shattering. You can't mean her, the father protested. She has no dowry worth mentioning, no beauty to boast. Enough, the Duke said sharply. Your rejection has spoken louder than your praise. Mira felt her knees weaken. No one had ever chosen her before, not for a dance, not for kindness, not for love. As the Duke extended his gloved hand toward her, Mira hesitated, fear and disbelief battling in her chest. And as she finally placed her trembling hand in his, she had no idea that this single choice would change not only her fate, but the fate of the entire duchy. The carriage ride to Ravenshade passed in near silence, broken only by the steady rhythm of hooves against frozen ground. Mira sat stiffly across from the Duke, her hands folded in her lap, her thoughts racing faster than the wheels beneath them. Each time the carriage lurched, she half expected someone to shout that a mistake had been made, that she would be sent back, forgotten once again. The Duke watched her quietly. You need not fear me, he said at last, his voice low but steady. Mira swallowed. I'm not afraid of you, Your Grace, she replied softly. It was only half a lie. I'm afraid of being sent away. Something flickered in his eyes, regret perhaps. I do not make choices lightly, he said. When I choose, I keep my word. She nodded, unsure what to say. Promises had always been fragile things in her life. Ravenshade rose from the mist like a stone giant, its towers dark and imposing. Servants lined the steps as the carriage arrived, their expressions carefully neutral. Mira felt their eyes on her plain cloak, her worn shoes. Whispers followed her through the halls like shadows. That night she was given a chamber larger than her entire childhood home. A warm fire crackled in the hearth and a bath had been drawn. Mira stood in the center of the room, overwhelmed, unsure where she belonged within such luxury. At dinner the Duke spoke little, but his attention never wavered. When a servant addressed Mira without courtesy, he corrected them immediately. She is my chosen, he said firmly. Treat her as such. For the first time, Mira felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Safety. Days passed and the court took notice. Nobles whispered openly, questioning the Duke's judgment. Some smiled politely, others barely hid their disdain. Mira endured it all in silence, just as she always had. But late one evening, as she wandered into the castle library, she found the Duke there, surrounded by books and candlelight. You read? He asked, surprised. Yes, she replied, when I was allowed. He gestured for her to sit. Tell me what you love. No one had ever asked her that before. As Mira spoke, about stories, about healing herbs, about listening more than speaking, the Duke listened as if every word mattered. And slowly, the walls around his heart began to crack. He realized then that he had not chosen the rejected sister out of defiance or pity. He had chosen her because she possessed something rare, quiet strength. And Mira began to understand that perhaps she had not been rescued. Perhaps she had finally been seen. The first true test came sooner than Mira expected. A grand banquet was announced in Ravenshade, the kind meant to display power and silence critics. Nobles arrived from distant regions, their jewels glittering, their smiles sharp. Mira stood beside the Duke at the head of the hall, her heart pounding beneath the borrowed elegance of her gown. She felt out of place, but she stood anyway. Whispers followed her like echoes. She's the one he chose? So plain, so quiet. The Duke noticed her trembling hand and placed his own over it, firm and reassuring. "Stand with me," he murmured. "Not behind me." And she did. When the wine flowed freely and arrogance grew bold, a visiting lord finally spoke what many had been thinking. "Your Grace," he said with a thin smile, "forgive my curiosity. But why choose a woman with no beauty, no fortune, and no name?" The hall fell silent. Mira felt the old urge to disappear rise within her. Her breath caught. She waited for the Duke to answer, but he did not. Instead, he turned to her. Mira froze, then understood. Slowly, she lifted her chin. "I was chosen," she said softly, yet her voice carried across the hall. "Because I know what it means to be overlooked. I know how to listen. I know how to endure. And I know how to care for what others neglect." Murmurs spread. "I may not shine," she continued, courage growing with each word, "but I do not break." The Duke smiled, truly smiled for the first time in years. From that night on, things changed. Servants sought her counsel. Villagers found her walking among them, tending the sick, listening to grievances the nobles ignored. Where the Duke ruled with justice, Mira ruled with compassion. News of the Duchess of Ravenshade spread far beyond the stone walls, not as a beauty but as a force. Months later, a letter arrived from her father, filled with apologies, excuses, and sudden affection. Mira read it once, then handed it to the fire. "You owe them nothing," the Duke said gently. "I know," she replied, "but I owe myself everything." She had not been chosen because she was rejected. She had been rejected because others could not see her worth. As she stood beside the Duke on the castle balcony, watching dawn paint the sky, Mira finally understood. Sometimes the greatest power is not in being desired, but in being chosen for who you truly are.